Hello, Matthew.
Hello. Sorry, I'm pouring my water here.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we'll be thirsty.
We will. It's probably worth reminding the guys here about some of the programming you've been involved with over the years, because in case they don't know, but The Sopranos, Deadwood, The Wire, Sex and the City, to name but a few. What I'm interested in is, there are incredible shows which I'm sure everybody knows and reveres, but how do you define what you do, and how do you define premium content amongst the kind of the clutter? Because the airwaves and the internet is full of content of a kind. Where does what you do fit into that?
Well, certainly standing here, we see how many different ways there are of getting content, which is a very broad term, to people that are interested in it, or probably to people that you hope will be interested in it. The premium television, which I guess we used to call it pay television, but now there's so much pay television. The premium television market is one that's unique in the sense that it's based on a subscription business, and therefore the content has to be worth paying for. If you're an ad-supported platform, content has to be worth paying for. In that case, the advertiser is paying for the content. But on a premium channel, you actually have to get people to pay, to make the choice to get your service. And when we first started making original programs at HBO, we're always making them, but when we really first got serious about it in the mid-'90s, there were only 4 broadcast networks in the U.S. making original programming. Now there's 40 or whatever in the U.S. alone, and certainly also a greater willingness to see formats or other things come from outside the U.S. So that proliferation of channels and brands and a lot of interesting stuff that people are doing has really put the pressure on premium television to continue to distinguish itself. And pressure comes from the distribution system. We can talk about that in a minute, but I think pressure just also comes from all the fine work that's being done out there. And at one time, it was maybe easy to say, well, we're just going to be a little bit more adult or a little bit more edgy, but those territories are also covered in the U.S. by what we call the basic cable channels, shows like Mad Men or Breaking Bad. So we consistently need to find ways to distinguish ourselves. I always felt at HBO it wasn't necessarily that we were better, that was somebody else's word, but what I could go for was that we were different. And now at Starz, coming into this job, having HBO on the shelf, having Showtime on the shelf, having all the channels underneath, my first thought was, okay, we don't really have time to slowly establish a brand. We have to we have to do that, and we have to do that with the assets that we have, which in the case of Starz is a lot of theatrical output movies from Disney and Sony, but also our emerging originals, which means there's a great investment, and certainly you have to look for a great return.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, has your approach to making programming or to commissioning programming changed? Do you think now more broadly about the international appeal of a certain show than you might once have done?
Yes, absolutely. I certainly think one of the distinguishing features of premium television needs to be how much money we can bring to the screen, because there's a lot of fine work that's going on in so-called reality television, unscripted television. Especially with the cameras that are being used. It's a good viewer experience. So we have to create something different, and that requires resources that lend themselves more towards a theatrical film model than an actual classic television series model. And we've also, because of just want to make something that's already difficult more difficult, we've decided to forego the pilot process, mm-hmm. which is one that's very expensive, one that's very helpful, but one that we've decided not to engage in. So we're developing things that we think are right, and then we'll go right off and make the first season of shows and trying to manage the process along the way. But what that allows us to do is get things up more quickly and also attract a different kind of talent, because when you have so many choices out there for the talent to go work, the one thing that you want to be able to offer them is somewhat of a unique situation. So can be a unique creative situation, but also there can be a unique business situation structured around how we develop and launch our shows.
And is it easier to get top talent? I mean, we touched on some of this yesterday, but it seems that the best talent in the entertainment business now wants to work in television. I mean, that didn't used to be the case, did it?
No, it's certainly, I think the door swings now between the theatrical world and the world of television, both ways very easily. And I think in part because the model that's been created on the basic cable and the premium television side are the 10 to 13 episode series orders, which still allow writers, actors, actresses to go off and do a feature film. And with the contraction of the theatrical business, certainly in the big studio movie business, certain kinds of film are not getting made, less films are getting made. And, most often now you hear people say that the most creative stuff is being done in the world of television. So I think good material attracts good people, good business opportunity attracts good people, and those are things that I think more and more A-list or close to A-list talents are finding particularly in the premium television space.
What about the ways you reach the viewer? Because you have your distribution partners, your cable and satellite partners in the US. Until recently, the sort of secondary partners like Netflix. I mean, you were Starz took an early lead with streaming and was one of the first channels or companies to make its programming available on Netflix. And then recently there was quite a public parting of the ways with Netflix, which I guess is an indication of how widely regarded Starz is because of the amount of programming you take with you, but also it also shows how sort of embedded now streaming is in the sort of public consciousness. I mean, how did that come about, and what's the future hold for you?
Well, in the U.S. and certainly I think in Europe to a great extent as well, programmers are committed to a distribution strategy that makes them have to wholesale to the platforms that actually sell to the consumers. So, as you said, in the U.S., premium television is on top of the video stack that's either delivered by your cable operator, your satellite operator, your telco operator, and they sell an enormous amount of products now stacked below that, which is really where the cost increases of the programming are based. And in order to get a premium television channel, you need to buy through all of that. So that's a difficult place for us to be in because we're also the ones that are the most sensitive to economic downturns because it's the only thing that you can jettison. So now, as the economy in the U.S. and certainly around the world is showing that income, maybe two-income households or maybe becoming one-income household, there's an attempt to start to create packaging a little bit differently so that you can create more price advantages for the consumer. But still, we're still the cherry on top.
So it's more a tiered system.
Yeah, we're still a cherry on top. And what we've been hoping and working towards is that certainly the cable operators who also have their high-speed wires, in the house as well, that we think that a premium, if that's their highest margin business and that's the one that they want to drive, well, for us, it's like, well, then why wouldn't you take premium television and put it right on top of a high-speed connection? That way, people that want that can get it either on the stack, if that's because they want everything, or if not, they're able to get it right on top of a high-speed connection, which in a sense is what Netflix has delivered. And so if they looked at Netflix as a threat to their business, we thought this is a terrific way for them to hedge against that and keep the consumer in their universe, whether it's someone who needs to step down or whether it's someone who's coming into the marketplace and you eventually hope to step up. That could become a pretty compelling entry point. Unfortunately, it's not, since we don't own the companies that we're trying to convince, it's a unique dialogue. But the streaming opportunity, I think the first Netflix deal that Starz made, and even before that, Starz was the first company to try to go direct to the consumer. But that was definitely before its time. But the Netflix deal was based, I think, in part on the frustration of not feeling that the traditional distributors were offering enough focus and getting the products to enough new customers in enough innovative ways.
And I guess that deal created a lot of value where before there was none, right? I mean, there was, or maybe a modest amount. You were getting paid for something, for a new window, effectively.
We were getting paid for a new window. I did not make the original deal. It became a deal that was really an albatross for Starz, but it's certainly, I think you could say to a great extent, that the success of Netflix was based in part on the backs of the Starz programming. You know, thousands of movies, the originals that started to come in, and it was a great way for them to bulk buy quality that they wouldn't have been able to go off and get. What the folks at Starz, my predecessors, didn't realize was how quickly that strategy would create a growth spurt for Netflix, and also the migration from the PC to the television screen. So the product didn't get differentiated much in the end from what people were viewing on their giant video stack, especially for younger consumers who were just coming out of college and had their PCs as their video player for a very long time, and now were able to access over someone else's high-speed wire a deep film and television business. So there was a lot of energy directed at Netflix. It was almost like a dot-com stock. You'd see their valuation be a little bit of a sort of acid flashback to the AOL Time Warner days, where you saw a company that had earnings, but certainly not earnings. I mean, it was a company that was operating off of their stock value, not necessarily off of their cash flow.
Right.
And we had a very big decision to make when it came time to renew the deal, because we had realized that premium television, premium packaging, premium pricing, premium tiering is the bed that we're in. It's something that we think is still valuable, not just to our distributors, but to potentially new distributors, but just that the Netflix model was one that was actually going to undermine that instead of enhance it.
So you took the decision to split. I mean, and that deal runs out in February?
Deal runs in February 28th. You can actually know how little thought went into the business, because it's supposed to end the end of February, but 2012 is a leap year. But the deal ends. The paper actually says the deal ends February 28th. So, yes, it ended February 28th. And at that time, all the Starz content will come down. The Sony movies came off a few months ago because of a clause in our agreement with Sony where we had passed a subscriber cap. And we made a decision independent of that to do a 90-day delay on our originals in an effort to distinguish what was an $8.99 and then a $7.99 product that Netflix was offering from the much higher priced product that our traditional distributors were selling us in. So it'll remain to be seen what happens when the deal is over. We would have very much liked to, and we encouraged them at the beginning of our negotiations, to create a premium tier above their package. I think it would have been, I obviously don't run the company. Reed is a brilliant guy, and Ted Sarandos certainly knows what he's doing when it comes to programming that platform. But it seemed to me that it could have achieved some of the business results that they looked for elsewhere, and yet kept our programming and had the, hey, look, this is a new deal, it's going to cost more, we're still making it available to our consumers, to our customers, but it's got to be paid a little bit more. And then maybe that would have created a way for them to get some other brands into that premium category, and then they would have been definitely a multi-tiered, multifaceted company. But they felt very strongly about their $8.99 and then $7.99 streaming product, and that was the horse that they were riding as far as it could take them.
And we all know what happened after that with Netflix. Let's go back to the originals and the programming that you're concentrating on now. How closely do you think about, or how much do you think about storytelling, and how has that evolved over the years, given the breadth of the shows that you've been involved in greenlighting along the way?
I'm a giant fan of scripted television. It's a form that's unique. It's not a movie. It's not a special. It's something that lives, that the creative live with, the audience lives with for years, and often years after. People invite the show into their homes, week after week after week, and it becomes I think a much more of a close bonding experience. Therefore, I think as television evolved and as people became more sophisticated, I think the storytelling, and this is something that we were able to do at HBO, you are not trying to create a model that you get people to fit into. Mm-hmm. What you try to do is to create an opportunity for people to get their work done with their vision. Mm-hmm. I used to think at HBO that this is a real reach, but I used to think of us as like the Medicis or the Medicis. Right. We were there to kind of foster the artistic works of others, and as long as the work was good, and as long as it was interesting, and I realized when I was working on a lot of the shows, somewhere in the middle of it, that all of these things had some resonance with the human spirit. When we were first doing The Sopranos and we had shot a pilot and we decided to pick up a series, someone had said to me, "Oh, what's that new show you're working on?" And I said, it's about a guy who's he's approaching 40. He's inherited a business from his dad, so he's got all of the things that go along with that. He's trying to build it, and he's trying to bring it into the modern age. He's got those responsibilities. Loves his wife. Has been married for a long time, but he has affairs. He has two teenage children, so he's dealing with all that. He has an overbearing mother that he's trying to get out from under. He's depressed. He's anxious. He starts to see a therapist because he's searching for the meaning of his own life. The only difference between him and everybody else I know is he's the Don of New Jersey. Yeah. So to me, that was the sort of draw, but the stickiness was the rest of it, because you go, okay, he has my life. I wish I could solve my problems the way he solves some of them. But there was certainly something underneath there, and I think the same thing with Sex and the City. I mean, Sex and the City was a glamorous package, but it was really about so many things that women had been reading about and experiencing in their lives, and no one had put a voice to it. So and I remember when Alan Ball came in and talked to me about 6 Feet Under. I said, "Well, what's your show really about?" He said, "Well, it's about a group of people who need to come to terms with their feelings about death in order to get on with their own lives." And I thought, well, if that isn't universal, it's pretty. So, I do think that premium space and now also basic television. But what we were able to do in the premium space was not set the bar so high, but move the line in the sand so far forward that a lot of space was there to occupy and set a way of working with talent that showed results. That gave other people, not just sort of the game plan that they could adapt, but also kind of the courage to be able to step into that game plan.
And does this stuff? I mean, that shows like that, especially now when there's so much other entertainment around and other forms of entertainment around, they really seem to cut through the clutter. Do you think is that true? I mean,
I certainly hope so. I mean, I think there are two. The other challenge is because we're not a broadcast network or we're showing, we don't have new programs on 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. We don't have that captive audience who keeps coming to visit you, and you can use a lot of on-air promos to tell the story. So much like the theatrical movie business, we're out there creating a very expensive off-air campaign. And we spend a lot of money on this, and the frustrating thing is that as soon as you've spent it for your premiere week, there are 5 other well-funded companies who are launching their new show the next day or the next week with their very well-funded and interesting ad campaign. So we need to create a sort of theatrical experience for the audience in these shows. It needs to look great. We need to sell it kind of like a movie. And it definitely needs to stand out. And as I said before, that is getting harder and harder and harder to do. And my thought is that instead of trying to have everything be a standout, I'm leaning more towards the idea that we need to turn Starz quickly into an identifiable brand.
Right.
And so that the programs will have something familiar about them, something similar about them, even if they're not exactly the same shows. So the words that we use are tentpole television, entertaining, theatrical film look. And so that when you turn on Starz and you're seeing the big Disney movies, the big Pixar movies, the big Marvel movies, a lot of the big Sony movies, and then you see the original programming, you're also going to see something that really doesn't feel like it's on another network. I've never been prouder than to work on a show like The Wire, which was on HBO, and unfortunately when it was on, it wasn't considered one of the best television shows ever, but now it's certainly gotten that status. But that's a show that I think it could only have lived in a network like HBO, where at that time it didn't really matter if a lot of people watched it or not. It was just so good you could afford to keep it on. Mm-hmm. I think the world is changing, and even in premium space, you need to find a way to get shows to your audience. To get an audience to your show. And I think this idea of a brand, I do think as the world becomes more cluttered, as there are more opportunities, people will still be looking for organizing principles. And brands can become those organizing principles for them when they're looking for entertainment.
And how would you define the Starz brand in that respect, in terms of your original programming? Well,
first of all, it's still evolving, but Starz as a brand is high quality, theatrical, first-run theatrical movies, along with a year-round schedule of big entertainment, tentpole type TV, mm-hmm. And not a lot of messages. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. TV that hopefully is fun to watch. Mm-hmm. There's an awful lot of things that you can turn on and feel like you're getting a little bit too close to reality. Our brand, I hope, is fun. Mm-hmm.
Have you been, well, since you went to Starz, have you had to be more flexible about how you finance your shows and the sort of partners that you work with?
Yeah. At HBO, we got to spend about $650 million a year to spend on original programming. Starz has done about 120. I can tell you which one's more fun. Mm-hmm. But what we've done, because obviously you're making these things, and our primary revenue base is in the U.S., and so we control those rights there. We have our home entertainment company, Anchor Bay, and it's great for us to be able, because the shows become kind of mini brands. Mm-hmm. So it's great to be able to control their distribution in as many places as you can. But because we need to ramp up from basically 0 to 50 or 60 hours a year over the next few years, we weren't going to be able to do that all on our own. And I had been a believer for a long time that the international television marketplace was going to become what the theatrical film marketplace became, which is that revenue from all parts of the world needed to be looked at when you were doing the economics for whether or not a television show could be afforded.
So you couldn't rely on the U.S. market alone?
No, no. I mean, if you pencil out any premium television show in the U.S., especially if you're not attributing a license fee, which you're not going to pay yourself, and there's no ad time, there's almost no shows that make money, actually return the entire cost of their production, unless you have a significant sale mm-hmm. in the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. DVDs, which are still holding up very well in the box sets of premium television shows, much better than theatricals. But they don't replace the revenue, especially as these shows get more expensive. So we've looked to control some rights, but also hedge our bets, and we recently made a deal with BBC Worldwide, mm-hmm. Not just because of their financial resources and their distribution expertise, but their production expertise, and also gives us one partner. So we've been able to control some of the rights that we need to control, and yet it's almost like an in-house production unit. Mm-hmm. But eventually, your ticket to expanding internationally is first your shows, especially if it's a brand. I think the next thing, and Showtime's done this, HBO's done this with Sky, you license your brand to someone else's platform, And then, if possible, at some point, you want to, you really want to be able to step into real platform creation, which hopefully would be driven in large part by rights that you have, built up and own and control over the years. But I think that whereas years ago, the only thing I'd asked in a bar by a woman was, "What's your sign?" Then years after that, you got asked, "What's your digital strategy?" I think now you're going to be asked, "What's your international strategy?" too,
Right,
because
right.
I think these are all extremely important things in order to achieve the success that we're all trying to harness.
Now we're on quite a tight clock, so there will be some questions. I will see if anyone wants to ask a question in a couple of minutes. But before I do you think that you talked about ramping up from your original programming from a very low base to, I can't remember how many hours you said.
50.
I mean, that's a lot of hours. Do you think that is that mix going to continue to change? Is there going to be more of an emphasis on your original programming? Is that how you'll define the channel?
We are, because we're a tracking stock of Liberty Media, there's a lot more, our revenue and earnings are much more visible than they are in a company like Time Warner, where Phil Kent, my old buddy, gets to carry HBO along as they report, and CBS and Showtime, they're all mixed up in there.
There's a wry smile on Phil Kent's face.
We're stuck out there. I'll be on stage next week doing a song and dance for the investors going, "Yeah, come on, we have a great future." So we have to have a responsibility of how we invest and build this. Certainly if we can continue to grow our business, which we've been able to, if there are new distributors that are looking to come in for our products, potentially digital distributors, or we find ways to increase our subscriber growth by working on new products with our current distributors. We will certainly return some of that investment into the expansion of original programming. I mean, that is the thing that we have to. But we're going to need to walk both sides, and certainly every call I'm on with the analysts, one of the first things that they ask me is, "So how do you see funding this thing?" Which in part was why we made the BBC deal, so that we showed them that we're going to be fiscally responsible here. But theatrical movies, I think, will always be a part of what we do. But they, I think, get less valuable the more the studios are going to need to find ways to monetize them, either before or after our window and before our second window. So the thing that you can really control, in your destiny are the things that you make for yourself. And the more that you can have, doesn't mean you need a lot, but you definitely need a critical mass.